We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.
Hello and welcome to the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast. I am Dr. Dave A. Cornelius, affectionately called Dr. Dave, and I am your host. Today we're going to just lean into thinking about how we're going to explore generative leaders and how they build trust and encourage work ownership by integrating the run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis gap tenant, as well as leaning into the fact that we win and lose as a team. That's kind of the concept that we're looking at. But we're also looking at the other thing of the LPM adoption operate step, right? This helps us to create a culture of experimentation. We use data to assess new ideas within the portfolio itself. So part of the concept is really start beginning to look at how do we put generative leadership in conjunction with leading LPM. So today we're going to do a bit more of a presentation, less interviews like normally for the other 3 or 4 other episode, where a lot of the energy was spent on talking to different experts who are doing like amazing things. So let me go ahead and do a presentation. And I think everyone should be okay with this in terms of just going through the process, right? So we're talking about guiding lean portfolio management with generative leadership, which is the whole concept. And I am a big Trekkie, and so I'm using elements of Star Trek, the Discovery season or the Discovery episodes to really like talk about LPM and leadership and things that are going on in that space. So if you're into Star Trek as well, that's kind of cool. So what we're going to focus on really, the hands and habits and different patterns and human-centric elements that we use to enable lean portfolio to really work well and really work well for the humans who are involved with building out and leading, some of this effort. And so one of the big questions we always ask is like, what is lean portfolio? So what we're really trying to do is really align some of the enterprise strategies with the execution of building products or services, so we could pretty much deliver great value, highest value for customers in your organization. So we're always thinking about, what do we have budgeted? What new ideas are coming in? How we're going to prioritize our investments? And important is what are we learning in the process? Right? There's a lot of great stuff that we're going to learn as we go through this journey and we start talking about the steps. There's great benefits to LPM, especially if you're a large organization and you have multiple portfolios, and then you may even have an enterprise portfolio, right? And that may contain all of your investments that, hey, I'm going to the cloud and I'm using that because that's a common thing, or we're going to get involved with AI, for example, and that's going to be across all solutions, maybe even the whole entire enterprise. So everyone is touched, by that initiative. So that's something that we have to think about. So when we think about the benefits, we're talking about aligning between enterprise strategy, technology, and the business execution itself. Just faster decision making in terms of trying to get things to market, and even just to get feedback from your customers and evaluate what's really going on. We also thinking about reducing the friction between leadership priorities. And I like to joke about people having these zombie projects just never dies, or zombie initiatives, and they just want to hang on to them forever. Right. And this is one way for us to, as a collective, to work together and figure out like, we're not going to do that anymore. There's no value. We're not generating revenue. We're not satisfying our customers. It just doesn't make any sense. So, and the last one is about we could pivot, persevere, or stop, right, based on evidence-based measurements, right? We have actual metrics. We have using objective and key results is one thing. We have KPIs. We have different ways to learn in the process as we're on this journey with LPM. One of the big practices that when we think about the generative adaptive practice itself is what helps to steer what's going on with generative leadership. It's very human centric. It's very focused on customers and delivering value. But for this episode, we're really going to focus on just two: win and lose as a team. And when we think about that, that is like this mindset that embraces successes and failures and learns from them, right? We look at failure as an opportunity to find ways to learn and grow. And the other tenet or principle that we're going to use from the generative adaptive practice, the GAP, is run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis. Right? We're using adaptive practices like lean agile practices, so that we can harness these new ideas with an open mind and assess their potential. Right? They're not afraid to experiment and take risks. So leaders who are using these two GAP tenets, it's really highly beneficial for the enterprise itself. As we chuck through here, when we think about these human-centric patterns that we're talking about, hands and habits, right? This is when we're using the operate step that we're trying to evolve our portfolio Kanban, looking at some of the different events, and also how do we work with defining budgets. This is really important stuff, right? That we're creating these environments for teams to thrive. And we're not just talking about execution teams, we're talking about leadership teams as well, and different other operation leaders who are involved in this process. And these habits that we're going to develop over time. So the lens that we're saying, like, hey, we're going to win and lose as a team, and we're going to create these environments for teams to thrive, different types of team. And then we're going to run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis. So then we're going to build up some really cool habits that we could continue to grow and move forward in the process itself. So, we've been talking about different LPM steps, right? The align. So there's 6 of them. When we talk about the LPM adoption step, there's align, organize, strategize, operate, govern, and measure and grow. And we kind of covered align, organize, strategize already with different guests who were on this podcast. Now, we don't, even though I'm walking through them in sequence, the thing is, we may dip in here and there between these different steps, right? The thing is, we may even take small slices and do increments from each one of those steps to help to progress the portfolio and help the organization to grow, right? So in the operate step, what we're really trying to do is really evolve the portfolio Kanban, and I'll show you what that looks like, and look at the different events and really start to evaluate what's really going on with our potential investments, right? And so this is really important for us to know that we're in the operate step today. We're talking about this step, and we'll never be able to just do one step by itself and to get done. We're going to have to take slices, right? When we take a slice of each one of those steps to progress, make progress with the portfolio itself. Now, one of the there's 3 major events that's going to take place, right? There's a portfolio sync, which is one of the events, and that happens monthly. And then there's a portfolio strategic review event, and that may happen quarterly. And then, the participatory budgeting event is a twice-a-year type event. So what we're really trying to do in this port sync it is really make sure that everyone is aligned with some of the investments that we're trying to move forward with the portfolio sync. And this is happening on a monthly basis. This gives us a chance to evaluate all these new ideas that's going to come in. So we're going to, review and decide on new ideas that's going to come into our portfolio and look at some of the lean business cases that they may have developed to really speak more and give us more ideas around what those new ideas are. It gives us a way to review and decide on some of the MVPs that are taking place. We get to prioritize our portfolio Kanban and see if there are any changes that's needed. We look at roadmaps and some of the strategies and the vision, and look at some of the budgeting that we have available, and just look at any blockers, right? And this is stuff that we just communicate back out. So this is a really, this is a big overview of the strategic, the portfolio sync event that we're working on. The portfolio Kanban is really important, right? This is how we actually start to visualize or make work visible for all the participants who are engaged in this process. So normally, we run through the Kanban left to right. We have a funnel where all the new ideas comes in, and we're gonna say, hey, is this really a portfolio epic that we care about? Yeah, if it is, cool. And then we may move it over to the reviewing, and we may refine it a little bit more and create this document called an epic hypothesis statement. And I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but let you know that there's actually a document that or artifact that we create, and we start to ask, is this idea, which is now we're representing as an epic, really something that aligns with our strategic themes or our strategies or enterprise strategies? And then when we get into analyzing, after we've answered that question, and we said, is this a good business decision? And in here, we may go a little deeper and build a lean business case, and this is another artifact that we'll produce. And then we'll move on to the implementing state, where we're running MVPs, where we're just testing things out, learning from our customers, learning from the markets, learning from the different ideas, technologies that we may be implementing. And we try to persevere, right? If we're actually getting some outcomes that's useful for us. Otherwise, we'll stop, right? And eventually it'll get done. And we're still tracking the unmeasured outcomes for benefit realization. So when we get into the idea, we're going to make $10 million from this initiative, how we're doing with that. If we said that within 2 years, how we're progressing toward that $10 million. And once the outcome has been achieved, then we'll close it, right? So we'll go through it. But one thing that happened recently, as I was working on an actual with a client and a team of coaches, one of the coaches came up with this, using some of the agile principles of, stop starting and start finishing. Right. And so instead of running the portfolio from left to right, from the funnel over to done, we went backwards, which I thought was a very interesting experiment. And it worked out. Right. I mean, as an agilist, I don't mind running experiments because I get to learn new different things. And so we start to look at some of the hypothesis, and I still call these epics until we get into really getting some customer feedback with the MVP. So there's still a hypothesis all the way until we're starting to validate, right, that idea. We're going to make $10 million from this different market segment with this different type of customers. We're still, that to me is still a hypothesis until it's proven out. So we went backwards. What are all the things that we're still tracking toward benefit realization? What are all the stuff that we're in the implementing state? What are all the things that are analyzing, reviewing, and then finally funding? So that was the stop starting and start finishing mindset, right? Which is a really interesting agile approach to go from right to left as opposed to left to right, which is really interesting. But totally, it was really to me, I was just say it's brilliant. How's that? That's a brilliant idea to really apply this to the portfolio and looking at it from that perspective. One of the things that's happening, and I'm just going to go back when we're in this implementing state, right? And we're looking at the MVP and persevere. There's two things that's happening when when we're looking at customer validation, that we're really beginning to understand the customer's pains and gains, and we look at Clayton Christensen, his concept of jobs to be done. Are we really beginning to understand what's going on with the customer and seeing if our solution is working? And the other aspect of it is that we're looking for customer traction, right? And the MVP persevere, and even down into the done, where we're measuring for benefit realization. Are they buying or consuming our solution because it's a fit for use or fit for purpose, right? And that's the thing that's happening in that implementing MVP and also in the done state, that we're beginning to look at this from the lens of, let's say, design thinking, right? Where we have the problem and the solution triangles, right? And that we're trying to understand the problem and design the right solution. So we're always in this thing. It's like, hey, is this desirable? Do customers and end users really want this? Is this feasible, right? Can we deliver the right solution through, a combination of build, buy, partner, or even acquire, right? Is it viable, right? Can we even build this thing? Can we offer this solution and receive more value than it really cost? And then, is it sustainable, right? Can we really manage this thing over its life cycle, and really account for its expected product market life cycle, right? We're just trying to look at this in different ways as we're going through the MVP cycle, that this is one context or another lens that we get to look at these different solutions, these different epics that's in our portfolio Kanban. And then sometimes it may not just be customers. We may be also looking at partners or technology, or maybe even some other risky assumptions as we're going through on the portfolio Kanban and this operate adoption step, that we're just beginning to learn more and understand what's going on. So this is really an important context when we get into the MVP, the implementation side of it, because this is when we start to really cost money, right? To build it, they start to cost time, using up, different people and resources of the organization. So it's just a good way to really evaluate and help everyone get on the same page and understand, the approach to doing this. Now, this is the strategic portfolio review. This is a very interesting thing, right? Because this is where we understand, like, why are we doing this? Why would we have these events? It seems like there's a lot of events, right? But this event is really important because if we're using SAFe and we're doing things in a quarterly, and this is from a SAFe perspective, just to be transparent, and you could see that the source is the Scale Agile Inc. of where this comes from, is that every 3 months, every 10 weeks to 12 weeks, we're producing some increment of value that we need to look at. And, this happens through our PI planning activity. So the strategic portfolio review is really important as we're going throughout the year. And we said, well, why are we doing this? Well, one of the key things is that it allows our leadership as part of the organization to create, define, and optimize, the portfolio solutions, so that we could deliver the best opportunity, the vision. We could balance short and long-term objective, risk and cost, right? And so this has happened on a quarterly basis. Often it's facilitated by, either the Agile PMO, or it may even just be a portfolio ops manager, who, if it's a smaller organization, or if the organization is designed without a VMO, well, value management office, they could be another individuals. A lot of the participants who come to this events are, you have your leaders, your business owners. You may have some of your enterprise architects, because they have really important insights about the technology that we use, and also the solution portfolio managers. Really important. You may also bring other people in from the the release train engineers, those individuals who are really helping to guide our the value streams, which is our teams, right? Our team of teams who are really delivering values, and even the epic owners may come in this event. So what we're really going through in this process too is like we're looking at that portfolio Kanban, the Kanban the portfolio Kanban that we showed before, and I'll just go back. This is what we're using as the tool for some of a lot of the discussions that we're having, right? And we're going from stop, starting, and start, finishing. We're going backwards, from right to left, right? Looking at seeing, what's really going on, right? Are we updating the portfolio roadmap, which we'll have established? What about the key objectives, the objectives and key result, the OKRs that we may have set up earlier, right, as part of the strategized process, looking at the roadmap itself, and do we need to review and update that as part of that? Looking at some of the key performance indicators, the KPIs and financials, right? Just started to evaluate what's really going on with the portfolio and if it's making sense, because then we can start making choices, right? Trade-offs, things that we want to stop and we really don't need. And so there's some anti-patterns, of course, with everything that we do, that we need to make sure that the strategic portfolio review has some established time and date and time, I should say. And it can't be ad hoc. It shouldn't be ad hoc, right? So we have some consistency with the attendance. We have the right focus. It needs a facilitator to run this event, and making sure that we're managing the time, right? If this is a 1 or 2 hour event, we need to make sure that the agenda itself, the topics are really relevant and we're really focused on what we need to get done, right? And we need to make sure that portfolio Kanban and stuff like that is updated. So the next major event that we as part of the operating step is the participatory budgeting, right? And so this is something that happens twice a year. And this is a very interesting event because it is, this is something that a lot of communities and municipalities use when they're thinking about how do we fund different things within their communities. How do we fund schools? How are we going to fund firemen and police officers and things like that? And they brought this concept. I think this was a Luke Homan concept, that he brought this concept that he have observed out in the community and brought this into the LPM practice, right? And this is what they're trying to do, is to make sure that there's a diverse amount of participants collaborating to thinking about how we're going to invest dollars for these different solutions, these different opportunities that's out there, right? And this is really an opportunity that they could begin to figure out, well, what are we going to fund? And it's not like one group, is funding and basically then passing that on. Everyone is working together. And we know for sure, right, that organization will generate way more ideas than they could fund, right? So this is also really important. So we could hear what people are saying, right? Hear what their thoughts are, and then decide how we're going to prioritize the investments. So this is kind of a visual of that we got from SAFE, is that here we have groups of people, 5 to 8 people working together from different departments, trying to figure out like what are we going to invest in, which value streams. And value streams in the context of SAFE, we're talking about team of teams, who's actually either on the operational side or also on the actual delivery side, who are actually building solutions to support the operation. So these are the trade-offs. And in this meeting itself, people aren't really, let's say, they're not really with the context of real dollars. We joke about this and said, yeah, we're using monopoly money, but that monopoly money itself helps us to understand how we want to invest in different solutions, right, as we're going through the process. And we're doing this in a collaborative way. So you may have people from finance there, you have people from HR, you may have people from product, from technology, from different business operations, who are participating in this process, right? And this happens like twice a year that we're trying to really figure out how we're going to um, how we're going to actually like use up our dollars and use it wisely, right? Because we know that the very few companies have like all the monies in the world, so we have to figure out what's the best way to use our resources and our people, right? One of the key things that as they're going through this whole process, there's two things to consider as part of this budgeting process, right? We're thinking about run the business solution investments, or we're thinking about grow the business. These are the grow the business are all the epics or hypothesis investments, right? So I was just thinking of what would be an idea of run the business. So in this context, in my thinking here is that we want to increase market share among environmentally conscious Gen Y, Gen Z consumers by 5% within the next year. And we want to launch some sustainable product line and partnering with eco-friendly influencers to really promote our brand through social media campaigns, right? This is assuming that we have some stuff already in place. We just want to make sure that we want to extend that, and so there's a requirement of some investments that we have to make and have a conversation around that. And also on the other side is grow the business, and this is some brand new solutions that we don't have that we want to kind of implement an AI powered market research platform within the next year to really learn more about consumer trends and identify potential new market opportunity, for innovative products development within the green energy sector. So we're trying to figure out different ways of bringing in different capabilities, and we have to make some investments. So if we want to get by 10% by 2025, at least we have something that it helps us to focus on, right? Something that we need to pay attention to. As when we're done with all of this stuff that we're doing, through the process, is that we're trying to figure out, how do we guide investments by horizons, right? I mean, and so the horizons that we're looking at is horizon 0, 1, 2, 3, and we're trying to figure out like where we're putting our monies, right? We're trying to make sure that there's a good mix of investments, and we're balancing near-term opportunities and long-term strategy and growth, right? When we think of Horizon 0, right, where we're trying to figure out like, we're going to decommission stuff, or things that are ready for decommissioning, we're talking about the current year. Horizon 1 itself is also the current year, and can we sell and enhance, some of the current offerings that we do have in our portfolio? When we get out to Horizon 2, right, we're talking about looking at an ROI period of 1 to 2 years. We're looking at maybe next generation Horizon 1 products and solutions, or maybe even new things that are not at that point in time in existence. Then Horizon 3 is a lot more long term, right? They're thinking like, there's some solutions that may take 3+ years. We know in a VUCA world, Windows is a lot tighter. Windows is 1 to 2 years is where this would get shortened up to be, unless you're working in an industry that has that type of space, like building cars, building a spaceship, right? I mean, and you could use this practice to make some of those choices, right, which will take you a much longer time to bring to market, right? So these are just different ways of us looking at bringing these, taking an idea or something that's existing and walking through a visual step with different people within the organization to make choices about how we want to manage risk, how do we want to deal with investments, and to really give us the maximum value in the process, right? So this kind of brings us toward, the end of this episode. And so here's some simple tips that I came up with, right? So as we're going through this operate step, and we're trying to set this direction for the solution or enterprise portfolio, we want to establish flow. And this is why we have a portfolio Kanban. And one of the fun things that we have in a Kanban is also this thing called WIP limits, right? WIP limits are really, really important, right? Work in progress limit is what that stands for, WIP, work in progress. So we want to actually make sure that we're not overloading the teams or overloading the organization with too many things. So, and I'm just going to go back because I think I kind of skipped over that earlier, is that we have this WIP of 5 up here, where we're just trying to say, hey, we're not going to have more than 5 epics in the reviewing state, which also means we'll never have more than 5 in the analyzing state. We could have less, but I'm setting that as upper bound, and that's just a guidance. SAFE gives something between 3 and 5, and I'm just saying don't go any more than 5, right? That's more than enough for the organization to manage and deal with, right? You may have to coordinate between value streams, which means you're coordinating between different solution teams to create some unique benefits. And so that's important as part of the conversation that's happening for PI planning and post PI planning. And lean budgeting is really critical, right? A really important step, I would say. So I just want to say, hey, thank you for joining the Knowledge Show with Dr. Dave podcast today and learning more about implementing the LPM operate step with the generative adaptive practice. Run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis and also win and lose as a team. This is really an important aspect of running any business in terms of making choices between investments and risk. This helps us to really take our strategies and put them into reality, right? So we could have some actionable tasks that we're working with. And then this step also involves, really establishing and evaluating the portfolio Kanban, evolving the portfolio Kanban, and make sure all the key players are involved in the different events. In the next episode, that's one thing that's coming up. We're going to continue because there's 2 more steps that we need to walk through. And so the next portfolio adoption step is the govern step. And we'll talk about the LPM govern step in the context of GAP's generative adaptive practice, one of its principles, which is partner and have conversation to learn more. This will just help us to uncover how GAP leaders could use this adaptive practices to harness new ideas with an open mind and really assess their potential of work. So thank you for, hanging out with the Knowledge Show with Dr. Dave podcast. You could find my podcast in Spotify, Apple, Audible, or wherever you get your podcast itself. And then this video itself will be available on LinkedIn and some of the other social media channels that we're streaming on. There are some goodie stuff that I may have here that, I've written several books that's available on Amazon. Go ahead and check out the Generative Leadership to Thrive book. And just learn about Ashanti Mwendo, who is covered in some of the stories beyond the windowsill and the innovation catalyst. If you like fiction, and you like fiction and business, this is a great way to find some of that information at Amazon.com. Or you could go over to Dr. Dave Duca. You could scan this QR code here, and that would take you to a place where you could actually buy the book that's available as Audible, Kindle, and print options. So again, thank you again for listening. Remember, the journey for excellence is ongoing, and every step taken with an abundance mindset. An abundance mindset is a step toward a thriving generative organization. So thank you for being here today. This has been, a great opportunity for me to continue to share knowledge and my experiences with you.
We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Day.